Well, welcome to this Train the Trainers video. And this Train the Trainers video is shot on a really sunny day, by the way, which is unusual for Manchester, where I am. It's going to be on the workshop on ReJesus. So we'd ask you just to, stop and make sure you get the slides. The slides should have been sent to you, or they're in the Dropbox, which you should have access to. Make sure you have the new version. Every workshop has been updated. So in the Dropbox, the old one will have been gone. And we've also written this for two formats, one online and one in physical settings. So I'll explain the differences. So right now you want to make sure you have the resources that you need for this particular workshop. So as I'm going through the slides and trying to explain, the changes and what it is to do in this to help you, then you'll be fully aware of all that we're requiring, and you've got the right workshop. So you'll also need the two stories about little Jesuses, and you'll see those in the Dropbox as well in Word document. You might see a script about ReJesus. Again, this workshop should transcend the script. We're updating all of the scripts as we're doing the videos. And so I can't guarantee all of the script will be updated. It will be certainly by the summer. And so it's May now. So by June, the end of June, we hope that all of the scripts are going to be updated as well. But we're just updating the videos because we've updated the slides, which is the most important thing for presentation. So the other things I'd say at the beginning is thank you for doing this workshop for us. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for your time and your effort and for your willingness to be one of our trainers. We do say that they're workshops, and we do say that, you're a trainer, which is why the first slide is always about, recognizing that Forged England in Wales is about equipping missional practitioners. And so it's important you just say that. Even if it's said every time for everyone that does a workshop, it doesn't matter. We're just trying to reinforce the emphasis that what we're trying to do in our training is to equip people to engage in practical, missional work as they encounter God in their community and step out for Him in faith. I think those are all the main things, and so I'll go on now, presuming you have the right slides. Oh, the last thing I want to say is, is you need to check your schedule and also your responsibility. So your schedule might have this as a 45-minute workshop absolute max because of being on an online format. It might even be less, so you need to be very clear. How long you've got to do your workshop. In physical setting, it might be a little bit longer because there's some kind of group work you can do creatively, which I'll say about in a moment. But the most important thing is to check your slide, your time schedule, to make sure you know exactly what it is that you have to do and when you have to be finished by. And a number of our trainers kind of begin to go over. So we just if you're someone who has had the experience of, you've had to rush up at the end, or people saying to you, you need to finish off, that means you probably say more than you should. I resonate with that, by the way. So you just want to make sure you're not oversaying and you're not leaving the workshop so lengthy with your information that they haven't time to do the breakout work. Which takes me to that second thing about the breakout groups. You may or not be leading your breakout group. Sometimes in this we get someone else to lead the breakout group, so just check that out. But the breakout groups are also noted, of course, in the slides, and maybe you're handing over to someone else who will make sure that they've got a good half an hour to be discussing the final slides. So online, that often is done by another person. And in physical setting, it might be two. So again, just check exactly what's required of you when you're finished. And even if you see slides, you're thinking, oh, that's like, who's doing that? You'll know whether it's you or not. If in doubt, check with your hub leader so that you're fully aware of what's going on, whether that's online or in a physical format. Okay, enough of that. Hopefully that all helps. So what we've done is, if you were in a physical setting and you were doing this, we would give you roughly about 22 images of Jesus that we would supply to you. You should have those, and you need to make sure you've definitely got them. They're in the Dropbox file, and you could print them out, but we have a set that we normally take with us, or we'd ask you to produce a set. We try and get them on no less than one per A4 page. And what we do is, in a physical setting, we literally say, welcome to ReJesus. And the first thing we do is like a group, intro activity, which you might take, 10, 15 minutes for. If you've got 45 minutes, I would use 10, 15 minutes as a group sharing. So you put all of the pictures down on a floor or Yeah, probably a floor would be better, and you make it like a mural. You just put all of the pictures everywhere, and you ask people to walk around and stand by or choose a picture that resonates with them, and that the images that they're looking at is trying to address this question, which you'll see on slide, which you can put up whether you're in physical setting or if you're in online. Select one image that says something to you about who or what Jesus is and why. And so they would literally pick one, stand beside one. It's okay if people, want to share the same image. They may have a different reason as to why it matters to them. But you allowed everyone to do that, for a period of minutes. Then they hold the picture, and then maybe you'd sit in a big wide circle in the room, or whatever way you want to do that. But you get everybody just kind of hold up the picture. And honestly, within only a couple of sentences, not a long time, you simply say, here's the image I've chosen. This tells me about something about resonates with me about Jesus and why. Now, if you're in online setting, which I'm going to give a little bit more instruction about since we've been doing this on COVID, it would be quite long to put 24 images and just scroll through them. So what we've done is we've used some slides where we've put 2 pictures per slide. So on the online version, you'll still put up the same slide. Look at the image of Jesus. Images of Jesus. Select one that says something to you about who or what he is and why. And then you will basically as you are being hosted, always make sure the host has got your presentation, or you've definitely got screen share. Then you would simply do what we do in the physical version, but we've done an online version. So we've put 2 images on slides, and if you go to the next several slides, you'll see that there's 2 images of Jesus. And it means if you're online, people can still see the images without having to see like 24. There's thinking about 12, maybe 13, I can't remember, 14 slides. So you just leave them up. And again, because you're not having them to go and select one, you're still asking them to choose an image that resonates with them, that they would still select the image. So you just remind them, as the images go on, you select one that stood out for you and why. What does it say about Jesus? So we're doing the same thing, but we're just reducing the number of slides and trying to do a slide version that's, that's doable because we're online. So you'll go through them and you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 slides of Jesus, and 14 slides. And in these slides, there are some double images. So I think there's about 22 in total. So hopefully if you're on an online format that, there's enough images there for everybody to pick one. So what we do is that we'll then say, we'd ask them online also, write in the chat box, what image you chose and why and what it says to you about Jesus. Now, we've not written that slide in because obviously we want the workshop to be for, for both groups. But what you need to know, if you have a trainer online, after you see the slide, after you see the slide revolutionary, you'll see it when you've got the right presentation. By the way, there's some new images in the slides, and if you are, if you have got the old set of ReJesus images, then you need to make sure you contact us or print out the ones that are on the slide, because we have updated some and put some extra in. So we'll make sure that's all done for you. But just on the slides, particularly, you've got the newest images. So on those slides, at the end, if you come to Revolutionary, you just want to say, before you move on to the next slide, that's quite important, before you move on to the next slide, then you want to ask them to say, just write in the chat box. So there's a chat feature you probably know if you're doing it online, just to write down, what it is, what image they chose, tell them to write the image and why they chose it and what it says to them about Jesus. And then just, you'll be able to let them do that, just tell them to write a short few words, and then you'll see that populated. And you might give them a couple of minutes, that's a long exaggeration, maybe give them a minute or so just for people to write it in, and then you'll see it populating. And then you can just, as the trainer, just look at that, and you can maybe make 1 or 2 very brief comments on that. Because actually you've still got to get on now with the rest of the workshop. So, and of course, everyone will have the feed, which is really good, and they can see all what people are saying about that. The most important thing, of course, as a trainer we're trying to do is simply reconceptualize, to reimagine what it is that we're trying to help people to get away from maybe stereotypical pictures of what they think Jesus is. And the point of our our whole workshop, as you will know, is to try and say, what's it mean for us to be shaped in his image rather than our image? So you don't need to say any of what I'm saying now. Just ask him to do the chat stuff. But I think that's why I'm saying it doesn't really matter. You read all of the comments or anything like that. It's just recognizing that in their training, they're beginning to be adjusted through the images to say, oh, I never thought about Jesus in that way. And that's kind of the point. Hopefully no images offends. I did get put Jesus as a punk and stuff in this one, and a Hell's Angel, which is, you know, if you get feedback on that, let me know. So then there is a question we can then ask, how do these pictures change or challenge your perceptions of Jesus? Now, if you're online, you've got a small group, you could probably use that as an open question and allow people just, ask them for 1 minute to say that. If you're on a group like, 20 people or whatever, then, that, if everybody had 1 minute, that's 20 minutes gone. So you'll not be able to do that. So it might be, I would suggest if you are in that setting, because you just use the chat feature, you need to then basically, I think, just put the question up and ask them to reflect on that. Ask them maybe, where you are, just write down how you think that these pictures change or challenge your perceptions of Jesus. So it's a reflective question. If you're in the physical setting and you've done all of the sharing of Jesus, when you're all around and you're all holding up your pictures, you could ask that question in the group setting and say, how do these pictures change or challenge your perceptions of Jesus? And just allow people to reflect on that, and again, use the time wisely. So then you're going to introduce the main concepts now, where in one sense it's now we've had that opening activity. I think hopefully that can be no more than 15 minutes max. Then you're going to have about a half an hour to really present the rest of the workshop, including some participation from others. And then you're going to have hand over to someone who's got who's going to do the breakout groups. And that'll, as I said before, it's either physical or it's afterwards, but they've got about half an hour in breakout rooms and we want them to have that time. So don't take away their time. Make sure you finish in your allocated time. So the next slide simply shows the picture of the book that we're encouraging people to read, to maybe purchase and get into. So ReJesus, a Wild Messiah for a Missional Church, Alan Hirsch and Michael Frost. So as that slide comes up, you're going to say, actually, what we're doing in this workshop is based on a material written by some of the founders of Forge. We're going to be thinking about what it means for us to rediscover who Jesus is and rediscover the image that we might find of Jesus within the narratives of this text. So then your next slide has what they call are the introductory questions. Again, these are reflective questions. You're not asking people to respond to them. But what you can say is, like at the very beginning of this book, Frost and Hurst ask us these very provocative questions in the light of trying to rediscover who Jesus is, scraping away the whole history of the church and the whole perception of Jesus in movies that we often see are westernized. They're asking these critical questions, and you have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 critical questions, and you just read them and say, like, here's some questions they asked at the beginning of the book, starting with how does the Jesus we meet in the gospel shape the Christian religion, to the very last one, how do we assess the continuity between the life and example of Jesus and the subsequent religion called Christianity? So, you're not teaching or training at this point. You're asking these very provocative questions. So then your next slide simply gets to the heart of what you're trying to ask. Is Jesus remade in our image, or are we remade in his? So then as we be able to say, the thing about the pictures that you looked at is that people had a perception. They want to conceive Jesus in a way that meant something to them, whether they were Renaissance art or whether they were contemporary, photographs, or whether they were people in a particular culture, as often they are. And they tried to think what Jesus would look like in our culture. One of the things that we all have a tendency to do is to think about, we have a perception, don't we, of who we think Jesus is. And the key thing is not, is Jesus, made in the image that we think he should be made in, because we've conceptualized who we think Jesus is, but actually, are we remade in his image? So the New Testament talks about us being conformed to the image of the Son. It doesn't talk about the Son being conformed to the image of us. And I think that's really important, that we think about what's it mean for us to be re-imaged in Jesus' own image, so we reflect him, rather than creating an image where actually there's this big gap between who Jesus appears in the Gospels to really be, and our portrayal of him in our own mind. So Jesus, in the next slide, asked this very critical question, who is it that you say that I am? Because that's one of the most important questions Jesus asks. Like, who is it that you say I am? Do you understand who I am? Do you know what I'm about? Do you know that, who do you think, I am? I know I've said it a number of times, am I a prophet? Am I a teacher? He asks his questions out, of course, in Mark's gospel and in other places. This idea of trying to recognize that this is really the central question in Christianity. Who is this Jesus? And that's what we're trying to discover. Who is this Jesus? And that was what the disciples were trying to discover. It's what people, in the world are sometimes trying to discover about who is Jesus. Like, who is this Jesus? And so what Hershon Frost said in the next little slide is, what's really important is that, like the followers of disciples in the early days, and the people who walked with Jesus as his 12, they had to discover who Jesus was. And what they discovered was that the heart of what the call to discipleship was about was becoming a little Jesus. So there's a great quote there. It says, following Jesus means we must also emulate him, using his life as a pattern for our own. This emulation we call becoming a little Jesus. When we call ourselves little Jesuses, we aren't claiming to be able to walk on water or die for the sins of the world. No, being a little Jesus means that we adopt the values embodied in Jesus' life and teaching. What we need for today is a conspiracy of little Jesuses unleashed all over the world, transforming their communities the way Jesus transformed his. So you might not want to add more teaching to this. Just be careful about, adding lots of extra words, to the slides. Just let particularly the quotes speak for themselves. So what Hershon Frost get at is the next slide is about we need to let Jesus be Jesus. This idea that the Jesus who is encountered in the scriptures, the Jesus who is encountered in the stories, particularly of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those stories telling who he is and what he did and how he went about his life and what motivated him. That actually what we got to simply try and scrape away all of the added layers maybe the church has put on, or we even put on ourselves, to try and scrape away as much as possible, to read the story as if we were reading it for the first time, to read and reread and allow Jesus to be Jesus by the things he does and the things he says. And what Hershon Frost is that we need to let Jesus be Jesus. And then we work out the complications of that in our own lives rather than trying to, tame and sanitize Jesus. What they also say is also about re-Jesusing the church. And perhaps this is maybe even a deeper issue, isn't it? Where church history for 2,000 of years is also layered with lots of things that are requirements, things that we're to be about. And we've got to say, well, what's it mean to let Jesus be the Lord of the church? What's it mean for the church to be shaped after the pattern of Jesus? What's it mean for the church to follow the agenda of Jesus? If this is the Jesus we discover in the scriptures, and this is the Jesus we see in the Gospels, who's doing the things he's doing and saying the things he says, how does the church reflect that Jesus? When church can often become so disconnected from the very person upon whom it is founded. Hershon Frost go on in the next line to say, it's hard to keep a clear vision of the true way of Jesus, particularly when you live in a culture that is so far askew from that way. So as we talked about also in weekend one about the erosion of the Christian faith and the erosion of the Christian stories and the embracing of, lots of lots of other ways of living and pluralism, all that stuff. What we're trying to say is, it's hard to live in a culture that itself has become very skewed away from who Jesus is also. And that's increasingly the case within our post-Christian society. So again, what you can do is use the chat room if you're online, or ask the question if you're doing the workshop. You could use a whiteboard and write up what people say in terms of this next question. What are some of the things in our society that make it hard for us to see or follow the way of Jesus clearly? So it's a generally open question. And again, you just make a list. As I say, if you're doing online, ask them to put the answers in the chat room. And again, just the chat feature, and just let that come through. Just give it a couple of minutes and ask people to kind of look at it for a few moments without you might summarize some of the key things that are mentioned there. So I think we're looking for things like, maybe materialism or individualism or capitalism. We're not trying to, say that someone has to be politically orientated, but we also got a lot of political correctness going around, and I know there's good features to that as well. But what we're trying to say is that there are things in our society that make it hard for us to see or to follow the way of Jesus. What about his way of suffering? What about his rejection of flamboyant materialism? What did it mean for him to kind of be an itinerary and go where he felt God was leading him? And what does it mean to be in a society where, there's real strong, gods of money, sex, and power, and Jesus, he certainly resisted these things, and the difficulty of the church trying to do the same. So, those are just some answers that I would give, and that are consistent, I think, with writing today about the radical Jesus and about contemporary culture that actually doesn't espouse many of the values. It doesn't really always champion the poor or things like that, So you allow people to answer the question in group setting or on chat feature. And then you come to the next quote is about the idea of Hirsch and Frost say is about the challenge of the church today is to be taken captive the agenda of Jesus rather than to seek to mold him to fit our agendas. And just read the rest of the quote and let that be there. So that's their response to that question. That actually this holy quest is to allow Jesus to be Jesus and allow ourselves to be caught up in his great adventure to the world. That whatever the world is trying to say to us, that's the agenda we're after, the agenda of the kingdom. And then we do, we have a couple of stories that we tell in this workshop that are read to us, and you should have the 2 little Jesus stories. What I would encourage you to do while you're in physical setting or online setting, so if you're online, you need to make sure you prepare this. You want 2 other people to read this, so it gives a break from your voice, and it gives another 2 people a chance to participate. So they will read the first one about a little Jesus, Martin Luther King, and let them read the story and let it speak for itself without further comment, because it's written in a way that says, and here is a little Jesus. And then once that's read and you have a slide that you can put up while someone's reading that, for example, you don't need to, share the screen with them, or you don't need to, let them, have to put the document up that they're reading. And if you're in physical setting, they'll just have it printed out and they can read it. So it says, Jesus calls us to join him in a reckless and exciting adventure. And when allowed to be as he appears in this pages of the scripture, you see, that's why I'm saying that this will say it all for itself. Jesus will not lead us to violence, hatred, greed, wealth, excess, or power. Remember those things we talked about that society might, see are really important today, but to a very different way of living and a very different type of community. And then Hirsch make this big statement, perhaps we have sanitized and tamed the radical Jesus, hence the title of their book, Untaming the Wild Messiah. That perhaps Jesus isn't this, nice, gentle Jesus is often portrayed. The gentle Jesus, meek and mild, that actually he's more radical than that, and is often upsetting people and often going against the grain of even his own society and the religious establishment. So what they say in the next slide is we need to see and name the disconnections of our own faith with the Jesus we are confronted in the Gospels. This requires honesty, reflection, and courage to look at his story more closely. And then Terry Eagleton's got a great quote that you can read about Jesus being presented in the gospel as homeless, propertyless, socially marginal, disdainful of kinfolk, a friend of ours, cast and pariah, adverse to material possessions without fear for his own sanity, a thorn in the side of the establishment, a scourge of the rich and powerful. Wow, what a quote, And again, after that we can say, is that how we encounter the real Jesus? Then Rowan Williams, who was the former Archbishop of Canterbury, said this: everywhere Jesus went, there was a riot. Oh, excuse me. Hay fever. No. Everywhere Jesus went, there was a riot. Everywhere I go, they make me cups of tea. So this is just kind of saying about, where Jesus went, there was like a stirring. There was like reaction to him. And the reaction may have been very divided, but it wasn't tame. It wasn't all nicey. It wasn't all about having cups of tea. And again, Hirsch and Frost's next quote is very helpful. Therefore, the process of re-Jesusing the church will begin with a rediscovery of the fierce and outrageous life of Jesus. and a Jesus who would carry a cross, a Jesus who would call us to suffering, a Jesus who would call us to have different values in the world, a Jesus who reorientates our whole life around the kingdom values, a call of Jesus to abandon everything, to follow him for the kingdom's cause. You know, you can put a number of things in there that talks about this is what it means to ReJesus the church, that the Christian community is centered around those values of the kingdom of God, those actions of the kingdom of God, that becomes the agenda of the church. And how much do we do that, you know, we put a lot of time and effort and money into, that's not as significant as getting to the heart of who Jesus is and what he does. Then you'll let someone tell the story of Sheila Cassidy, which is a moving story. And so let someone read that. Again, if you're online, you're just going to say, we're going to hear another story about a little Jesus, and let someone read that. And I think that'd be a great thing to do. And if you're in group setting, let someone read it. And then they ask, Hirsch and Frost asked this key question again from their book: where is the scandalous Jesus in our churches today? Where is the Jesus who taunted the religious elite, who teased a Canaanite woman, who evaded arrest, who commended the faith of a pagan, who waited 4 days to resurrect Lazarus, who promised not peace but a sword? Then take us on to the next slide. For when we rediscover the wild Jesus Messiah, we will see God differently. Because that's true, that our concept of God will change when we encounter God in Jesus Christ. We'll see the church differently, about its agenda and its purpose in the world. And we'll see the world differently, because then we'll look to see where Jesus not only might be at work, but we'll realize that, you know, Jesus has got purposes for the world. And rather than the world being a terrible thing and everybody's, you know, really bad, I mean, there is evil in the world, but it'll help us to see the world as an opportunity to be true salt and light and to reflect Jesus to that world. But we must first be marked by Jesus ourselves. And of course, this is what it means to be a follower of Jesus, to commit ourselves to being shaped and changed to reflect more and more of the lifestyle and teaching of Jesus. So we're making sure that we're understanding that this isn't just a theoretical exercise. This isn't just something we read in a book. This isn't just, you know, for the person next to me or for someone else I'm thinking about who thinks, you know, they're not a very nice Jesus. It's actually trying to say the Jesus who's living in me and shaping me into his image, the Holy Spirit who's conforming me to that image, Lord Jesus, you know, let your work begin in me and continue to work in me what is pleasing to you and bring it to completion in my life. Constantly change me and constantly help me to reflect more and more that lifestyle and teaching of Jesus in your mercy, God. So that's how we end that workshop. And then you'll go into breakout rooms. And just in case you are being responsible for doing the breakout room sessions as well, and one of the things we try to do is, even if you're doing the workshop, because it's quite a, you know, one voice is quite a lot there, and we want to make sure that you're giving the breakout time necessary for your workshop. So obviously, you know, I've done that in 27 minutes there, and it's about half an hour I've done that in. And I you know, if you tend to go on, aim for 30 minutes, and you definitely will hit 40. And so I think the key thing is, you know, the whole point about discussion and about the process of Forge is they're going to get this through osmosis time and time again. I mean, for those of her trainers who are working in Forge, you'll know that there's stuff like in Weekend 2 about like missional lifestyle, about salt and light, stewardship of, you know, good influence. So there's lots coming. So these are all our first introductory stuff to the weekends. So, you know, don't feel you have to get like overpack it. Just let them get the main learning outcome. The main learning outcome is actually, you know, we need to rediscover Jesus, and we need to let Jesus be Jesus, and we need to shape the church and our own lives around who Jesus really is, and get on with his things. In the breakout rooms, what will happen is that in a physical setting, you'll see 4 stories that are printed out on a back-to-back piece of paper, and you'll put people in breakout rooms of no more than 4, so that, you know, or breakout spaces, no more than 4, so they have a chance to dialogue, you know, on those questions. So they might have a half an hour to look at a number of the texts. What will happen is they're asked to look at 3 questions. What do they tell us about Jesus? How do they shock or disturb us? What do they call us to or teach us? So if you're in a physical setting, you'll have back-to-back in your hand a copy of those texts, and they've simply got to get through as many as they can in a half an hour. There's 4 readings overall. So they read them, and then they discuss each one of those questions. Because breakout rooms online is different, I'll encourage the breakout rooms are able to be in groups of 3 or 4 and people in them. So if there's 12, we do 4 rooms of 3 people. So we'd still put, a small group of people in it. And what we would probably do is to assign each of them a particular passage to read. So you'll see the reading there. So you could ask them to look up in their Bibles and say, look, this is the passage we want you to read. Group 1, Group 2, you're going to read this. Group 3, you're going to read this. Group 4, you're going to read this. Or of course, you could simply, because the slides will, because you've got a handout, that gives the 4 passages, you can simply allocate them to allocate the people to the breakout room. What I'm trying to say is there will be breakout rooms. Let me just say that again, sorry. There will be breakout rooms online. And what you can simply say, breakout room 1, look, this is the story you're looking at. Breakout room 2, this is the story you're looking at. Breakout room, this is the story you're looking at. 3 and 4, etc. So you split up the 4 stories, a maximum of 4 stories, but you're not giving all 4 stories into the breakout room because they're going to have a chance to kind of talk about that. And I think that would give them a good half an hour to really discuss that question. If you're thinking, well, I think it may be better to give them 2 stories, then of course because there's 4 stories, give out breakout room 2 stories, breakout room 2 stories, and then 3 and 4 2 stories, and you might select, because there's 4 stories, just to do, breakout room 1 and 2, stories 1 and 2, breakout rooms 3 and 4. So, you just got to work it out if you are responsible for the breakout rooms. I think in online, we try to make somebody else responsible, so it's actually their headache. But at least you're prepared to recognize that you're not going to give 4 stories into the breakout rooms, but you are going to give at least a couple, because breakout rooms just take a little bit longer. And then what will happen is at the end of all of the workshops, and the same with ReJesus, is they will all be called back. And in physical setting, again, you'd be able to do the final reflecting together, share one thing you have learned from this workshop, and share one thing you will do as a result of this workshop. So again, it takes us back to not just thinking, but also what's one takeaway that people can do? What's the one action they're going to do? So again, depending if you've got a large group of people online, like 20 plus people, you're not going to be able to do that reflecting together by having everybody say something. So again, you'll use the chat feature and you'll simply ask people to write down one thing they've learned and one thing they will do. And it might be, again, if you're not the person doing that, then actually, the person who is doing the breakout group on the chat will ask people to come. They'll call them back together. And then if they forget, you can prompt them to say, we've got the final slide, and actually they need to reflect together. And then they'll do that in chat. And if you've got a small group online, so if you've got anything up to maybe 12 people, maybe not including the trainers, so you might have less, then allow them to, have that group reflecting time together where they've got like 60 seconds each to answer those questions. So the reflecting together slide about sharing something they've learned from the workshop, sharing one thing they can do as a result of the workshop. That's how we end every forward session about, what are they learning? Because that's important. And what are they going to do about it? And that's really important as well. So I hope that makes sense, as I've tried to use the Train the Trainers video to kind of cover a physical setting and an online setting. So just to recap, make sure you've got the up-to-date slides. Make sure you've got the 2 little Jesus stories given to 2 other people if possible. And make sure that you use the chat feature for longer responses to do, with the images and also with the feeding back there that I've talked about. In physical setting, you can, wander around, look at the images and physically, tangibly touch them, but you'll still cover the same, obviously, material. In the workshop, keep it, to 30 minutes, 40 absolute max, and then you'll hand over to the breakout rooms, and you'll find out who's doing that. And if it's you, you'll do the physical set with the calling back in the final question in a group, a big group. Or if it's online, you'll be in breakout rooms where you'll give those designated scriptures also, and you'll come back for the final question. So I hope that kind of helps. And if in doubt, talk to your hub director. And if you need any of the materials, then please get in touch with me, Trevor. So at forginglandandwales@gmail.com. So thanks for that. Appreciate that. May God bless you as you give this important workshop. Hopefully it'll bless you and encourage you and inspire you, and it'll also challenge your own heart as you're challenging others as we think about engaging the world in ways that are centered around the rediscovery of Jesus. So thanks again, and may God bless you in every way.